Good morning and welcome to the New York City Council hearing of the Committee on Oversight and Investigations. At this time, can everybody please silence your cell phones? If you wish to testify, please go up to the Sergeant at Arms desk to fill out a testimony slip. At this time and going forward, no one is to approach the dais. I repeat, no one is to approach the dais. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Good morning. I am Gail Brewer. I'm chair of the City Council's Committee on Oversight and Investigations. I want to welcome those who are listening. I'm sure there will be more here in person and the public. This is a hearing on the Office of the Special Commissioner of Investigation for the New York City School District. It's known as SCI, and it's known as the Department of Education. SCI is an independent watchdog for the New York City school system, which includes the Department of Education, the Teachers Retirement System, and the Board of Education Retirement System. Although a major portion of SCI's work involves investigations of those who prey on students, the office also investigates fraud and theft of public funds and resources and other serious misconduct. Investigations may result in arrests, criminal prosecutions, or administrative proceedings, as well as policy recommendations for the chancellor. I love policy recommendations. Recent cases include a teacher who sought and received paid sick leave while serving time in federal prison, the husband of a deceased pensioner who unlawfully collected $800,000 in benefits over 20 years, and a special education teacher who engaged in inappropriate text messages with a 17-year-old student. The Department of Education employs 140,000 New Yorkers, or maybe 150,000, and has the largest budget of all city agencies at $32 billion. SCA is an office of 51, I understand with a head count of 69, however, and an annual budget of just a little less than $7 million. I think I did the math. No, the staff did the math, to be honest with you. DOE allocates 0.02% of its budget to the independent watchdog. And we'll learn later, I think, from wonderful Commissioner Coleman's testimony, and I thank you for sending it in advance, that during the FY new needs request of $202,000, that was denied, but it only amounted to approximately $1.50 more per employee. I think you'll hear me later say, you need more money. SCA faces staffing challenges. The number of teacher misbehavior complaints has skyrocketed. The office fields nearly 10,000 allegations of abuse and misconduct every year. At the same time, attrition is increasing. SCI went from 24 investigators in 2020 to 20 investigators in 2023, and there are 17 vacancies. Some might consider today's hearing several years overdue. The previous chair of the committee, the Honorable Richie Torres, became interested in SCI in 2018 when then Department of Investigation Commissioner Mark Peters, who was an intern of mine, you all appreciate that, seized control of the agency and axed its top official. An independent investigation later concluded that Mr. Peters abused his authority when he absorbed SCI and unlawfully retaliated against his leaders, Commissioner Coleman and Daniel Shalat, who are here today. They were reinstated and SCI returned to its status quo. In 2019, Torres and his city council colleagues, Mark Traeger and Bob Holden, received a letter that accused SCI leadership of burying investigations perceived as harmful to then Mayor Bill de Blasio. Torres was moving forward with an inquiry in early 2020 when the pandemic shifted everyone's focus and priorities. I didn't call this hearing to relitigate what happened in the past. We're here to look analytically at how SCA is fulfilling its mandate to root out and prevent misconduct, and how the DOE cooperates and complies with investigations and policy recommendations, or does not. Before we begin, I would like to thank people who have worked really hard on this hearing. For this committee staff of Oversight and Investigations, Legislative Counsel Nicole Kada, Policy Analyst Eric Cohen and Alex Yablon, and Finance Analysts Oren Kotowski and Andrew Lane Lawless. Within the O&I division staff, Director Aaron Mendelson, Deputy Director Meg Powers, Assistant Director Zachary Merrick Casales, Senior Counsel Kevin Frick, Investigator Katie Sinisi, and data scientist Uzir Kadir, and legislative fellow Amisa Ratliff. And from my office, the very great Sam Goldsmith. And now I'd like to turn it over to Legislative Counsel Nicole Kada.
Thank you, Chair Brewer. We will now hear testimony from the administration. We will hear from Anastasia Coleman and Daniel Schlackett. Before we begin, I will administer the affirmation. Panelists, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Is this on? No. Sorry. Thank you, Chair Brewer, for the invitation to speak and to testify in front of the Committee on Oversight and Investigations. I appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself to you, and hopefully other members of the committee will come in, and to share with you the substantial accomplishments and continued priorities of the Office of the Special Commissioner of Investigation for the New York City School District. By way of biography, my name is Anastasia Coleman, and I have served as the Special Commissioner for nearly 6 years. Previously, I was an Assistant District Attorney in Kings County, an Inspector General with the city's Department of Investigation, and the Title IX Coordinator and Director of the Office of Institutional Equity and Compliance at Fordham University. In my nearly 35-year professional career, I have worked both outside and within city government. As a former prosecutor and career investigator with no political agenda or aspirations, my focus is and has been to ensure that the city's children receive a safe and secure education without the interference of fraud, corruption, waste, or inappropriate or unwanted advances. I am pleased to share that SEI, through the efforts of its small but hardworking and diligent staff, has been effective in achieving many of our goals and adhering to our stated mission to serve the children enrolled in the New York City School District and to help provide students and their families with a safe learning environment, free from corruption, fraud, and mismanagement. SEI was created 34 years ago by then Mayor Dinkins and former New York City Board of Education, BOE, now known as the Department of Education. The historical origins of SEI underscore its critical mission, its need for independence, and its continued importance. SEI was established as an independent watchdog of the city school district to disband and replace the BOE's, which the Board of Ed's internal Inspector General's office, that was deemed corrupt and ineffective. At the time, the BOE IG was appointed by and reported to the board, the governing body of the New York City Public Schools, and was thus inherently conflicted when investigating matters of policy enacted by their employer. A select mayoral blue ribbon panel, the Joint Commission on Integrity in the Public Schools, known as the Gill Commission, ultimately recommended a new office independent of the BOE and remove inherent conflicts, and with the same statutory authority, but also independent from the city's Department of Investigation. The Gill Commission specifically considered, but ultimately rejected, incorporating SEI within DOI, concluding that their concern is that as exigencies evolve, DOI will inevitably move resources that should be dedicated to eradicating corruption in the school system to whatever the target of the hour may be. Although this explanation may appear as ancient history, more recent events have demonstrated that the concerns of the Gill Commission are still relevant. Per Mayoral Executive Order 11 of 1990, the City Charter, the Board of Ed regulations, and Chancellor's regulations, DOE employees are required to report wrongdoing to SEI, and most take this obligation seriously. SEI also receives complaints from numerous other sources, including parents, vendors, other city agencies, and elected officials such as yourself. The Special Commissioner also serves as the Inspector General of both the New York City Teachers Retirement System, TRS, and the Board of Education Retirement System, BERS. And SEI acts as the investigative arm for the New York City Conflicts of Interest Board, CYB, and matters involving the DOE, TRS, BERS, and their employees. SEI's investigations can result in various criminal and administrative actions. We regularly work with trusted partners in law enforcement as well as other city agencies to ensure the best possible outcomes for the DOE, the city, and taxpayers. I came to SEI in 2018 as only the third special commissioner and proudly the first woman to hold the position. I am preceded by the founding special commissioner, Edward Stancic, and then by Richard Condon, who retired in 2017 after a long and distinguished career in city government. 2019 was my first full year as special commissioner. Since that time, I have continuously evaluated our investigations and processes, our standards and practices, our available resources, and our needs. We have taken great steps toward and continue to improve our performance. But our work is never done. As a long-term goal, our office intends to expand its role identifying and investigating wrongdoing in the New York City schools and making referrals and policy procedure recommendations for the betterment of the system overall. To do so, however, we must add more highly trained investigators, attorneys, and administrative staff. In general, the structure of our office is not unusual for an investigative body. SEI currently has an allocated headcount of 69 total. That includes investigators, attorneys, administrative staff, and executive staff. Unfortunately, for reasons I will discuss shortly, our current roster is well below that number. At its core, SEI is an investigatory agency, and at its heart of any highly functioning investigatory agency, the heart is the investigators. SEI is currently staffed with 33 investigators who make up our intake unit, our field investigators, a tech investigator, and our supervising investigators. The remainder of our staff consists of attorneys, all of whom are former New York City prosecutors, data analysts, administrative and IT staff, and executive staff. Although we are budgeted for a total headcount of 69, we currently have 51 employees. In recent years, our headcount has been as high as 60 in fiscal year 20 and in fiscal year 21, and as low as 50 in fiscal year 23. Certainly a challenge when tasked with the oversight of the entity the size of the DOE and its two retirement systems. While there have been some positive notes in hiring, for example, we brought in 10 new hires in fiscal year 23, there have been an equal or greater amount of separations, particularly in the post-COVID environment. 12 employees separated from SEI in that same fiscal year. In fiscal year 23, SEI had an overall attrition rate of 23.5%. SEI is not unique in our hiring challenges. Agencies citywide are facing similar difficulty. Where SEI is different is our unique responsibility to oversee a department as vast and crucial as the DOE. Our hiring goals, first detailed in the Gill Commission report, are to seek out seasoned investigators with strong backgrounds in established investigative models, procedures, and investigative techniques. As such, we regularly seek 211 waivers for many of our current and prospective employees from DCAS. We have found that hiring retired law enforcement professionals meets our particular needs because these individuals arrive with the requisite training and experience to perform at a very high level from the very first day on the job, a standard required to protect the integrity of the public school system and the safety of its school children. During my tenure, however, we have expanded recruitment efforts, sought out unique areas for posting, and taken steps to grow our workforce with greater representation and diversity, including diversity of background and experience. We have also added analysts, both legal and statistical, to assist investigators with the day-to-day work on our investigations. We have increased the size of our intake unit, updated our website to make it more interactive and user-friendly, and added an online reporting portal. We have pressed and succeeded in having the DOE include a direct link to SCI reporting on its website and updated our outdated record retention system. SCI is also currently updating our evidence collection and retention system, and we are in the process of determining how best to upgrade a more than 25-year-old case management system. This update will be crucial in assisting our investigators in the management of their heavy caseloads. But there are goals not yet accomplished. For example, although SCI regularly sends supervising investigators and attorneys to speak at DOE staff conferences and conducts outreach through the use of newly produced pamphlets and social media pages, it has been a longer-term goal to create a separate training unit within SCI. A standalone training unit would allow our investigators to focus entirely on their primary task of conducting casework and would work closely on producing and delivering specific training to DOE employees and vendors on corruption, prevention, reporting requirements, and other areas of concern to the school district. Currently, SCI relies heavily on the DOE to raise awareness of their employees' reporting obligations and to regularly train them on their financial responsibilities. The DOE currently enrolls nearly 1 million students at approximately 1,800 facilities. It employs approximately 140,000 people, about half of whom are teachers, and maintains a budget of more than $39 billion. Last year, SCI received more complaints than in any single year in its history, crossing the 10,000 complaint mark threshold for the first time. SCI is on pace to end the current year with similar numbers. In calendar year 2023, SCI concluded 404 investigations, the most since before the pandemic, including 152 involving sexual or inappropriate conduct, and 52 that involved the inappropriate use of social media or electronic communications between DOE employees or vendors and students. SCI substantiated 224 total cases in 2023. In 2023, the most frequent open category of investigations involved employee misconduct, a general category that encompasses a range of malfeasance by DOE employees and vendors. In addition to cases involving inappropriate actions of a sexual or suggestive nature, employee misconduct includes cases involving financial irregularities, 109 cases, falsifying documents, 99 cases, and theft of services, 52 cases, to name just a few. SCI investigated 24 cases involving theft of DOE property and 71 involving allegations of vendor irregularities, including false billing, lack of certification or DOE approval, or failure to provide services. In addition, SCI received 12 complaints specifically involving violations of Chapter 68 of the City Charter and identified potential conflicts of interest in an additional 12 cases. 32 cases involved either a failure to supervise a child or a failure to report a potential danger to a child. SCI also received 17 complaints alleging a violation or violations of the city's whistleblower laws. In 2023, SCI referred 59 substantiated cases to the New York State Department of Education and made 287 personnel recommendations based on substantiated findings. SCI recommended disciplinary action in 56 instances of a majority of which included recommendations up to and including termination of employment. SCI also made recommendations of 101 problem codes as possible bars to future employment or contracts, 40 financial recovery actions, and 90 recommendations for appropriate disciplinary actions by DOE administrators. Last year, SCI substantiated 33 cases that identified to the DOE precise amounts of loss, theft, or mismanagement of funds totaling more than $1.5 million. SCI also identified thousands of dollars due to loss, theft, or mismanagement of other monies for which an exact amount could not be determined, In addition, SEI continued collection and monitoring of restitution or fines from previous cases totaling more than $6 million. Since 2020, SEI has made 215 policy and procedure recommendations, PPRs, to the DOE, all of which are publicly available on our website pursuant to Local Law 43 of 2020. Of those 215 recommendations, the DOE has accepted 49, partially accepted another 5, claimed that 60 were already their current practice, and rejected 47. 42 PPRs remain pending at the time of this testimony. SEI also posts regularly updated information regarding the status of PPRs and the DOE's explanations or reasonings for their decisions, most often posting their responses in their own words. SEI did not face any cuts to our budget under the city's most recent program to eliminate the gap. However, SEI operates on a slender budget of just over $6 million per year, covering both PS and OTPS dollars. SEI's budget has remained exactly the same since fiscal year 2020, $6,361,054. Of that, $6 million is designated PS dollars, and only $335,131 is our annual operating OTPS budget. Although there is a slight increase in PS dollars in our fiscal year 19 budget, approximately $250,000, SEI's OTPS budget has remained exactly the same during my entire tenure as Special Commissioner, $335,131. Now, obviously, there is a great discrepancy between the operating budgets of the watchdog agency and the entity it is charged with overseeing. But this is not for want of trying. SEI's annual funding as a pass-through budget of the DOE. During my tenure as SEI Commissioner, we have made several asks to the Mayor's Office of Management and Budget, OMB, Education Task Force for increases in both PS and OTPS funding. For example, in March of 2019, SEI submitted a new needs request for an increase in PS dollars in the amount of $176,000. This request was rejected. In fact, the last PS dollars increase SEI received, not due to a citywide mayoral order, was in fiscal year 2017. On March 6, 2020, immediately before the pandemic struck, SEI made a new needs request for fiscal year 21 of $2,565,000. This request was part of an ambitious several-year plan to increase SEI's headcount by 24, 12 per year over 2 years, and an increase of $535,000 in OTPS to support the increased staff. This request was not rejected outright, but rather was put on hold indefinitely due to the COVID crisis. In March 2021, SEI submitted a request for a capital improvement project, a much-needed upgrade to our record retention system, in the amount of $190,695. This amount was approved and funded through the School Construction Authority. In March 2022, SEI submitted a new needs request of $202,000 to OMB, consisting of $162,000 in PS dollars and an additional $40,000 in OTPS dollars. This request was specifically targeted to address post-pandemic attrition and retention. The request was denied by OMB. Currently, SEI has a new needs request of $275,000 for OTPS pending with OMB. The present ask includes funding for necessary training for our investigators, including annual peace officer training, firearms qualification, and investigative interview techniques training, to name just a few. We have been told that we will receive an answer upon completion of the adoption process. As you can see, these budgetary requests are not extravagant and do not contemplate unreasonable increases or luxury expenses. As an example, our monthly wireless carrier expenses, to name just one such account, has increased from $300 per month to approximately $1,500 per month, $18,000 annually, while our OTPS remains unchanged. This may seem like a minor expenditure. However, when considering a total OTPS annual budget of $335,000, a 500% increase in a vital vendor service is significant. SEI, as a watchdog agency, has always been mindful of agency spending, both the DOE's and our own. However, SEI must also grow with the times and the challenges we face. In conclusion, I am pleased to have had the opportunity to introduce SEI to so many members of the council, particularly yourself, Chair Brewer, and to have been given a little insight into the hard work and accomplishments of this really extraordinary office. I look forward to answering any further questions you or members of the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for excellent testimony. Most commissioners don't give us as much information, so I'm deeply appreciative. I'm also deeply appreciative of Councilmember Lincoln Ressler being here. We're the two watchdogs. We're going to start with questions. I'll do a few, and then I'll be glad to ask my colleague. He always has questions. So I know you talked about this, but just to be a little bit more specific about, you have oversight of what I would call DOE and of the retirement systems. Are they different kinds of oversight? Could you be a little bit more specific about them?
Sure. So just the nature of the pension systems is different from what the DOE does. For the pension systems, we've had conversations in the past historically and with them over how they find whether a pensioner is dead or not, for lack of better terms, because that is the problem when pension money is being sent and either someone is stealing that money or a relative is cashing that money when the person's already passed away. So we've asked them, and they've put into place different ways to check on whether somebody is alive or not. One of the PPRs that we did recommend was to see if they could have like an annual certification from the pensioner to say, I'm alive. It's like an alive check. And that was one of the things that we did recommend. I don't remember if it was BRRS or TRS. And I don't believe they actually did want to do that. I don't think they were up for that recommendation, and they had different reasons for why they were not going to do that. But that was one of our recommendations. So the pension system, there's a tendency to have cases where someone's stealing the pension money. For the DOE, it's the broad scope. We've got safety concerns. Avanti's law was actually put into effect by the City Council to make sure that students who leave buildings and have there's proper doors and things like that. So there is a safety aspect for missing students in that respect. There's also the safety aspect of the sexual misconduct cases where it's something, sometimes the police would automatically go ahead and arrest somebody, but we're in that middle ground sometimes where there's text messages or there's no way to prove and show that where a prosecutor is going to take a particular case, where we'll take the case and develop it to make sure that that person is no longer working for the city school system. So we have those safety types of cases. Then we also have the basic procurement type of cases, and then we also have billing types of cases that also, so I mean, I'm just putting them into general buckets,
Right.
But they can, our cases vary all the time based on the different complaints and the different proactive investigations we conduct.
Okay, and this is sort of almost too current. This whole issue with the cell phones and the governor, I must admit, I feel it's challenging to always have a cell phone as a student in the classroom. On the other hand, I was around when you have to pay the bodega or pay the truck on the corner $1 to keep your cell phone during the day. In fact, I'll be honest with you, in my office, I didn't charge, but I'm right near a high school. I let them bring them in. They came in after school. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So I mean, I hope that, actually doesn't happen, then we have some other solution to that issue. You'll have a lot more complaints on that topic. I assume you have not taken a position on cell phones in or out of the schools,
No.
but we don't need more problems. How many SCI employees conduct investigatory work? I know you mentioned the total number, but could you be more specific on that?
Sure. So right now, what our current head count is, we have 51 employees. And out of those 51, 25 are actually field investigators. Then we also have, and they're divided into 3 teams. Then we have 9 investigators that are receiving and taking in the complaints and going back and forth with whoever is complaining or making sure that it's, the case is going to where it needs to go and collecting information, more information, so that we can decide about whether there's an investigation to occur by us. Then we have 7 attorneys, including myself. So we all do some aspect of the investigative work. Then we also have 1 person who's our tech person, who's the tech unit. And then in IT, we also have someone who will do any of that computer forensics.
Okay. So you talked about the budget, little under 7 million. Does it break down in terms of these different categories? Is there some other way to look at it?
Sorry.
In other words, your budget's around 7. Obviously,
Right.
you want to have more money. We all agree with that. But I didn't know if there were some breakdown as to how much goes to oversight, how much goes to investigations, or does it just depend?
It just depends. It really does.
Are there challenges? I mean, we all have challenges. But are there specific challenges facing investigators to conduct their investigations? I must admit, I'm a real techie, and I was a little, I think in your testimony, you mentioned the need for more technology, even though you got some based on the OMB recommendation that you made. But it seems to me that you need more, that would be more capital perhaps. But is technology one of the issues, or are there other issues that hamper your investigations or don't hamper?
Well, ideally, I really, one of the things that we've been evaluating this year is to update our case management system, which would make it easier for the investigators to enter their material and have things that it would make the flow quicker and easier for them. And also, we've actually engaged in conversations with the DOE themselves, because they're required to give us data and information. And we retrieve the information from them. What I'd like to do is to get the more direct access, so it would make it easier for our investigators to just pull that information from the actual
On the system.
the actual system.
Now, is that something that's budget, or is it policy to change in terms of access to the system? Is that a budget issue, or is that more of an access issue?
Well, it's going to be both, right? Because we're going to need to have people who have the skill set to
Okay,
pull
so
that information.
So it's a
but also-
personnel issue, okay?
Yes.
And not necessarily a capital issue?
Oh, yes, but we also, software, there's different software that we would like to upgrade and that we need. That's what we'd like to have. We also, I mean, it's more of a capital, probably a new capital need that we're going to have, because our laptops are getting older. That's also going to be something that we're going to put in for,
Okay.
a new
So
capital.
are those some of the major challenges facing investigators, or do you have other ones that you would like to list?
Well, there are other challenges that the investigators do have, because the nature of our investigations, our investigators are going to the schools throughout the entire boroughs. So it's a lot of travel, a lot of going to the different places is something that when we come to interview people to come work for us, when they discover that you're driving everywhere, and that is a negative side of our attraction and getting people, because they're like, oh, I would have to be in the Bronx, and then we try to make sure that our investigators can try to geographically set up their day, but sometimes it's very hard for them to do. But that is a challenge for some of our investigators.
Okay. Did you want to add something, sir? I saw you looking.
First of all, thank you for having this here. My name is Dan Schlackett. I am the first Deputy Commissioner at SEI. I appreciate you having us here. I was just going to add, as far as the costs and needs, that it'll be no surprise, I think, to members of the committee that the cost of technology continues to rise, and that includes forensic technology. So that's both hardware and it's annual subscriptions that you pay for certain services on there. And it is in the same way that we mentioned the rising cost of simple things like a wireless phone account for all of our investigators. The use of forensic technology is more important than ever now for our office, and the cost of it is going up annually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
In terms of reporting, now, who do you report to specifically, if anybody, and how do you work with, if at all, the New York City Department of Investigation?
So each of our reports that conclude an investigation that we're reporting to the chancellor, we also give a copy of that report to the DOI commissioner. And then on an annual basis, we report out to the public our annual statistical numbers, and we report that out on our website, and we send that out to the chancellor and the DOI commissioner too.
Okay. So do you feel that the school system as a whole understands to go to you, not to DOI, not to the, I mean, I have people, for instance, they get very confused, not in terms of your agency, but if they have a complaint, do they go to the city Department of Human Rights, the state,
Yes.
the federal? That's very confusing. Do you feel that people understand to go to you, or maybe DOI sends somebody to you if it's appropriate?
So we have both, right? One of the things that I wanted to make sure happened was that we put onto the actual, and we asked for, and the general counsel at the DOE put our information onto their website when they list where to complain, and it takes them directly off the DOE website to us. We also receive complaints that come in that go from DOI, they send them over to us. So if there's ever a mistake and someone goes to the wrong place, it always comes to us. And we have a good relationship with them because sometimes we'll get something and we'll send it to them.
Right.
But we receive complaints from everywhere and everybody, it feels like.
Okay. Regarding the two retirement systems, do you investigate the systems or just the beneficiaries? Have you encountered issues such as the performance of vendors who conduct physical and mental health evaluations? The whole world of vendors is always challenging from my perspective. But again, the systems themselves.
So when we've done a review as to how they go about their processes, we haven't done a review of here's what happens when somebody comes to, I'm coming to you to get my money, and we haven't done one of those reviews. We've done a lot of the reviews of people stealing from the system and talking with them and reviewing their processes for making sure they're not continually paying somebody who has passed away, and that's really a corruption vulnerability for those systems. As far as services to anybody who's elderly who can't.
The vendors, yeah.
We don't do that.
You don't do that, okay.
No.
Because that's often challenging. Do you work with other city agencies such as NYPD, or does that just depend on a case-by-case basis?
No, we work with NYPD frequently, right? Because there are also times when NYPD will go and interview, and especially the Special Victims Unit, they'll go and they'll interview and a case will go to them. We'll monitor those cases to see what's the outcome, because many times the cases will go to them and the victim isn't able to iterate exactly what may have occurred, or they may find that the child is not swearable, or whatever reason they're not proceeding. We always will then reach out to them and get those cases from them. So there is a back and forth, and usually our investigators will ask, what is it about this that, either the parent might not have been cooperative, the child couldn't say because they were nonverbal. So there is a lot of back and forth with NYPD regarding that.
Okay. And then do you work, for instance, with other city agencies, like maybe ACS? Are there other city agencies that you have contact with?
Yes, so when cases, we do get cases that come in from ACS, Department of Mental Health and Hygiene, and there is a back and forth as far as who will take, like we're kind of like the backstop to make sure that things get looked at. So there's always the phone call, like, are you taking this case? What are you doing? So we don't duplicate our efforts, right? So that is something there's constant communication at that early stage so that we know, did you do an investigation already? What are you doing? And sometimes it's sufficient for us and we'll say, fine, let us know, or go ahead and you'll do it. We also have other partners that are not just city, like we do partner up with DOI on cases. We'll partner up with the FBI and other law enforcement because we know it's always best to use partners rather than go it alone. So that is something that we do.
And then language, obviously you have a small staff, but how do you handle language if you don't have the language that's appropriate? If that comes up, how do you handle that?
So there's a language line that we
And
have.
it's not great, though.
I know.
The fact
we
it
have-
sucks.
We have some Spanish
Terrible.
speakers. We also, our website, bless you, our website has translation into at least 5 different languages, but that is what we're using.
Okay, because that, to me, that's something that we all need to work much harder on. Language line is a challenge, in my opinion, having used it a few times.
Yep.
I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, and I have many more questions, but council member?
Thank you so much, Chair Brewer, and I hope everybody heard her kind words about me on the record. But I do just want to begin by thanking you, Commissioner Coleman, for your work. You have a sterling reputation. We're very fortunate to have you in this role, and appreciate your, really, as Chair Brewer noted, thorough remarks today. Your testimony is insightful and helpful. So I just want to understand a little bit better about the high rates of vacancy and the high rates of attrition that you're experiencing on your team. It's critical that SEI have the resources that it needs to conduct thorough investigations. You know, in a school system as big as ours, the largest in the country, over 1 million students and staff, I guess if the DOE was its own city, it'd be one of the 10th biggest city in the country, right? So it's a big oversight role that you have each and every day, and number of complaints are growing, and we don't have the staff to handle it as thoroughly as we should. So we have my understanding is you said 51 of 69 positions are currently filled, so that's a 26% vacancy rate. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a 23.53%.
That was the attrition rate?
Oh, sorry, yes.
And that 23.5% attrition rate year
Sorry,
over
yes.
year. So we're seeing significant turnover. And
Yeah.
you often see significant turnover when you're severely understaffed, right? Because when everyone's being asked to do a job and a half or 2 jobs, then it's tough and people burn out and don't stick around, which only creates greater challenges. So, and forgive me for not knowing this, but the 69 staff lines are DOE staff lines? Or are they DOI staff lines?
No, they're SEIs.
They're SEI, so they're its own independent.
We're independent of both DOI and DOE, so it's just for us.
And what do you think have been the greatest challenges in filling these vacant positions?
So I think it started in 2022 and
Sure.
2023. The 5 days in the office was challenging for us because we had investigators who then could go get jobs that were hybrid or remote investigator jobs. So we had a number of people leave for those types of jobs and for higher paying jobs. Those were 2 big factors. And in addition, we also, we do use 211 waivers through DCAS. So, you know, former NYPD or former law enforcement, there's a 1-year, like the law changed, I don't know the exact date of when the law changed, but the law changed where there's a 1-year separation period where the person can no longer, can't work for the city during that 1 year. And then they can work for us after that 1 year.
Right.
So we get many calls for people who are at special victims or, you know, in great, you know, detectives who are in busy houses who want to come and work for us because they hear about us and they're like, oh, this is great, because they see us out there. and they have to wait the 1 year. And during that 1 year, that's when someone goes and finds a new job and says, well, this is great, I like my new job, or they forget about us. That has been one of the issues. So those have been like the main issues that I can identify as being, this is the struggle.
That was a new policy, that 1 year?
I think, what was it, 2014, 15? I think it goes back.
A decade plus.
It goes back a decent amount of time, but in the past, it was very easy to get people to wait the 1 year and then come. Now, after the 1 year, people are already like, oh, I've moved on to this job and I'm making a decent amount of money, in the private sector, doing investigations where I'm doing, investigating people shoplifting, or making more money than what we're going to provide. So that is one factor for us that's unique to our office.
Sounds like we should change the law, Mr. Ressler.
We should look at it. If it's a city law or a state law, I don't know.
It's a state law.
It's a state law.
civil
So
service.
we should look at it. I mean, I think an exception for SEI would seem totally reasonable. I wonder what the incentive is around it, and those individuals are probably collecting a pension while they come to take these new positions as well, which I have feelings about, but neither here nor there. But I definitely think it's something for us to look into further. But
That'd be great.
Recognizing some of the challenges that are specific to SEI, but also that have just been broader challenges that we faced in hiring across city government, we're now beginning to see across many agencies vacancy rates thankfully decline. Part of that, unfortunately, is due to the elimination of positions that we've seen by this mayor and OMB. That has not happened at SEI, thankfully. Could you speak a little further to the challenges on recruitment and what can we do? Are there ways that we can assist or support you or support you in filling these vacant positions?
What we've done is we've actually reached out specifically to different affinity groups directly to see if we can get people, who are retired who want to come back to work. So we've gone to, the National Association of Women's Law Enforcement. We send out, there's a list of 8 that we actually just send out every time that we have a job. Here we're looking for a posting, and this is what we're looking for. And we have tried to change where we look and where we post, and our getting back, we haven't been getting quality applicants.
So if I'm hearing you right, the biggest challenge we're facing is identifying the right applicants. It's not processing, it's not, being at competitive salaries. It's particularly just identifying quality applicants you think has been the challenge?
That has been the challenge, and also there has been some challenge as far as DCAS reviewing the 211s, but they've been, it fluctuates on how busy they are as far as the timing, because we lost a few candidates who were waiting for the DCAS waivers, and they were like, well, we found something else because the process took too long.
Could you give us a sense of when you say the process took too long? Are we talking about weeks, months, 6 months?
A couple of months.
Couple months.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a new job and you're not happy where you are, and something else is there, you'll take it. So yeah, actually,
we can all share stories of people who've accepted jobs in this administration and waited 6, 9, 12, 15 months before they've actually begun from the time that they've been hired. So it's very challenging. Please.
I just wanted to add that we can't really emphasize enough the difficulties with the 211 waivers as an obstacle in hiring. Not just because of the period of time that it takes often for them to be approved. Obviously, there is a citywide effort to not use 211 waivers, but it's my understanding that educators citywide or statewide have a kind of ongoing waiver from the state, pedagogues do, and and that I believe is needs-based, and I think in this situation it's the same thing. We do frequently lose people because the process takes so long. We lose people because they don't have to go through that process in other areas of, outside of city government, but certainly in the private sector. So it's a tremendous difficulty for us.
And actually, we did have somebody who we had something waiting over at OMB for a promotion, and that took quite some time, and then that person found a new job in that time period. We were like, congratulations, we finally have the money and you're now promoted. And then she's like, and here's my resignation letter. And we really did think that she was a great person, and we were happy to promote her.
Have there been any other challenges with OMB and hiring and processing other than that example of the promotion being delayed?
Which other, I think that's, oh yes, well, salaries, obviously, we're keeping them where they are, but that's a factor.
And of course, that continues to be a citywide issue. I know, I don't think
not
that's
really.
unique to SCI investigators, but certainly it is a factor in recruitment, especially when you compare other benefits of either the private sector or in other government areas where there's more remote work options, where there are things like that. So obviously an increase in a base salary for investigators, again, not just for SEI, but in other investigative agencies, would likely draw more qualified candidates.
Yeah, we've had people leave to go to the state AG's office because their salary was just slightly better. And I was like, but aren't we a better place? But we've had two investigators leave to go there because they had a higher salary and they had hybrid at the time. And
Well, I'll certainly put some thinking into other potential partners and recruitment ideas and strategies. I think that we can certainly talk to DCAS as well to see if there's anything we can do to speed up those reviews for when you've identified quality candidates that you're looking to bring on for those 211 waivers. And if there are any other ways that we can be supportive or helpful in making sure that you have the staff and the resources that you need to do your job, it's critically important. And the safety of our children is paramount, and you play an essential role in ensuring the well-being of our students and our staff at our most important public institutions, our neighborhood schools. And so we value your work, we appreciate it, we just want to make sure that you have the capacity that you need. And I really want to thank Chair Brewer and the whole O&I team for their thoughtful report, the coverage today in the newspaper, and holding this hearing to bring attention to this issue, because it's really important. So thank you very much.
thank you.
We've been joined by Councilmember Joseph. So one question is, why is SCI's budget included in the DOE's budget? Because if there's an investigation into employees who play a role in setting the SCI's budget, I don't know if that would be a conflict of interest, but why is it included in DOE's budget or is not the general fund?
So it's a pass-through that they put as a one line in their budget. They have not touched it. They're not to touch it, it's my understandings, but they leave it in their budget because they fund it.
Okay, so it doesn't feel like there would be a conflict if there was somebody who's involved in the pass-through in the budget in any way.
No, because they can't change that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And in fact, all of our requests have to go through the Education Task Force team at OMB so that it is out of the hands of the DOE.
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, we feel strongly that you need more staff and more budget, but what is the appropriate ratio of SC employees to DOE employees if you had your druthers? Obviously, we look at it as, something like, I don't know, a percentage of DOE has remained, SC's budget has been at 0.02% over the last 5 years. So maybe there are other similar organizations around the United States, I don't know, that have a different ratio that would be more appropriate. Obviously not such a large school system, but the percentage may be better.
Yes, actually, I actually speak with the oversights for the school systems in LA and Chicago and a few of the other ones. And we were comparing back in 2021, we were comparing the different percentages. And Chicago has, back in 2021, they had 359,476 students, and their budget for their office was $7,257,957.
Wow, big difference.
That is a big difference. I think it was 0.093%. I'm not very good at math. I had someone else do that for me.
You don't have to look hard to look at the number of students versus the budget to see that it's very different.
Correct. And LA also, back in 2021, they had 495,255 students, and their budget was basically a 5.2 million. So theirs was a 0.043% of that. So, yeah, I think that, our budget is not comparable to those two oversight bodies for the amount of students and employees that they oversee. And I think that ours is much bigger, and we have a lot less money to do our work.
Chicago's a real difference. If your budget's a little less than $7 million a year, how much would you estimate that you save DOE every year by loss prevention? I think you gave a number in your testimony.
I did. And, I tried to calculate and figure out, what do we do over time? So last year, there's two ways, right? There's what we've actually identified, the specific amounts, and then there's also restitution is another aspect. So for the annual, our annual amount for last year was the $1.5 million. And then we go back in 2022 and 2023, we've tried to add it up, but over the time for the last 4 annual years, the loss, theft, and mismanagement of funds totaled, it was $3,590,758. And back in 2019, we actually identified, there was a contract, it was for the GPS of buses. Navigant was the contracting vendor, and we did a robust review of that, and in the end, the DOE didn't proceed with that, so we count that as that was a $10 million contract that they stopped proceeding with, and we identified that.
So I would argue that you generate revenue for the city.
Yes, the money we tell the DOE goes to collect that money.
It goes into the general fund, I assume? Or the DOE, we don't?
I don't know, we give it to the DOE, and the DOE, I think,
Okay.
goes.
Because we argue in this, obviously as oversight and investigations, I feel very strongly about more money for Department of Investigation, CCRB, Department of Correction, et cetera, because all of them are what I would consider, because people do unfortunately bad things, they are revenue generator, not different than other agencies which are more obvious, like, things like, Department of Finance, collecting the property taxes, that's a bigger one. But they are revenue generating. If you're revenue generating, you should be able to get funding that helps you generate revenue. Because unfortunately, as I said, people are going to do bad things. So, all right, so that's helpful in terms of the numbers. Thank you. And just in terms of what's the complaint intake and review process? Just could you walk us through that, how that works?
Oh, sure. So when complaints come in from various forms, and actually since we've added the portal, we get a lot more complaints from our portal.
And
So
when
they-
did that, I know you said that, you gave us a date. When did that go into existence? Was it a while ago?
It was in 2020,
Okay,
or it might have been, it was in 2020, just before the pandemic.
okay.
And so the cases can come in from our website, email, phone, walk-ins. Walk-ins are a lot less now. There's a lot more that come directly into the portal. So that once it comes in, there's an evaluation process from that as to, where is this something that we can ask the DOE to investigate. There is an investigative arm within the DOE.
Correct.
And we do refer many of the matters to the DOE, to their OSI, their Office of Special Investigations, or many cases go to the Office OEO over there, just based on our look at what comes in and what goes out. So we do that evaluation of the whatever comes in, and then we refer many of them out to wherever they need to go to make sure that they're actually handled, that don't rise to the level that we're going to take the case, and then we assign the cases to our different teams.
Okay. And if they go to other agencies, like OSI, do they let you know the outcome in some way, we're handling it, or is that just pro forma?
So what I instituted is that whenever we refer something to OSI, we have right on the bottom saying, like, if this rises to a level of criminality or gross mismanagement, please refer this back to us. So we do sometimes, we will send something to OSI, and then we might get a new complaint that relates to it that, you know, it's basically the same or something different, but it does rise to a certain level, we'll say, well, give this back to us. Or if they're reviewing something that they say, oh, well, this is actually something criminal, we need to send this back, they send it back. But we typically don't go and follow up to say, you know, what's the outcome of your investigations? We have our own, we have enough.
I know you have enough of your own, I understand. So after the investigation is completed, what's the process? In other words, it's done, how do you conclude? How do you, you know, tell the persons, et cetera?
So at the conclusion, if it's substantiated, right?
Right, if it's
If
substantiated.
it's substantiated, a letter will go to the chancellor, and then a copy goes to the DOI commissioner. And then it's the DOE that makes, they're the employees, and they'll make those decisions, or they're the contracting, you know, agency that will make a decision whether they want to continue with a contractor or not. So we send a letter. And then there usually, if there's PPRs involved, usually we'll have a conversation and with whichever unit it is, and we follow up with them as far as that is concerned. And then the DOE goes through their processes, and sometimes they'll ask for our investigator to testify at one of their 3028 hearings. So our investigators will have to go testify. And then, you know, we usually get feedback. I don't know about the time frame, but we'll get a feedback from their trial unit saying we're going to proceed with this case in the trial unit, or they'll say what they're doing with the person.
Do they have a time frame under which they have to get back to you, or does that depend case by case? Is there any time frame on that?
It's case by case, and they're pretty good in getting, you know, in making decision whether something's going to proceed to the 3020A or not. We usually get that feedback pretty regularly, but there is no specific time frame. 3020A has very specific time frames from when we give it to them, so they have to follow those.
Do they have a time frame?
Yeah, they have specific rules to follow.
Okay. Council Member Rita Joseph has questions. Go ahead.
Morning, Chair. Thank you so much. Just had a few questions around what is it like for whistleblowers' complaint process? What does that process look like?
So whistleblowers come in all forms to our office, and in that it's treated in the same ways as far as the investigation is concerned. We have some reporting requirements back to the whistleblower to let them know, you know, we're still working on your case, or whatever the case may be. And then in the end, they are the ones who receive a letter. It's different as far as, like, we're not sending a letter to the DOE with the outcome. We'll let the person know whether or not they specifically meet the requirements of being a whistleblower and proceed from there. Oh, yeah, please. He's our whistleblower expert.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in the process, obviously the whistleblower applicant themselves gets a letter defining what our findings were. If in fact we find that there was a violation of the whistleblower statute, then we do make a recommendation to the DOE as the employer that they need to take restorative action, and there's a time limit on that. So we do follow up with them to make sure that they do take some action in those cases.
What is typically a timeline from beginning to end?
Of the investigation?
Yes,
or of
investigation,
that process?
and the process for the whistleblower.
That is a very difficult thing to answer as far as timelines, and because every investigation, including whistleblower investigations, are different. It depends on cooperation by not only the complainant, but by other witnesses and potential subjects that we speak to. They can take, can be conducted in as little as a few months. They have taken much longer in certain instances where, for example, a complainant is out on a medical leave and that extends and we're not allowed to speak with them during the period of their leave. We have very frequently had complaints that are made to our office of whistleblower violations who then don't necessarily want to follow up or are not cooperative in following up on their own complaint. Those take a very long time. So it kind of runs the gamut, I think.
So it's different depending on the case-by-case basis. Okay,
is.
thank you. One thing I wanted to highlight was, what's the difference between SCI and the Office of Special Investigations? Sometimes they both get twisted and they think they're the same. Could you differentiate that for me?
Sure. Originally, when I first got to the office, I was like, we should make sure we have it down here, that we're different from them, and this is why. But the reality is, when complaints go to OSI, they will give them to us when they know, like, this is for you, this is not for us. Not, because number one, they realize that we do the gross misconduct, we do the, the sexual misconduct between an adult and a child. We do more of the serious cases for life. I think every complaint is serious, but if it's something very serious, we'll be looking at it. If it's something that's like a one-off doctor's note, here, OSI, you can handle it. If OSI says we did the one-off doctor's note and then realized that the person went on leave for 2 years based on this doctor's note, and the doctor's note is false, they'll get back to us to give that to us, and then we can proceed to see, is this something that we can pursue criminally and talk to our partners and make it a little bit more robust.
So there is an exchange between your offices sometime to determine who's going to handle the investigation?
Yeah, we do take the more serious cases.
Of course. Are there instances when allegations of sexual misconduct go to OSI? Why, and who decides that?
Well, they shouldn't be going to OSI, right? So if it's something that they could, if it's something where the allegation may be this person was looking at me in a different way, in a way that I thought was sexual. It's where there's nothing that makes it, but we don't always necessarily send them to them. It will depend. It depends on the allegation too. If someone goes to evaluate that type of where I got looks, but I can't express it further, then it would be, okay, let's see if this is anything else going on. But they do not handle those sexual cases.
How do you inform the public, public education measures, if any, SCI undertake to inform the public about the role of being a watchdog?
So we do get a lot of complaints from parents because we are on the DOE website now, so that, because if you're upset about your child, usually at school, usually you will go to the DOE's website or you'll go to the DOE. The principals, and if you're going to a principal or a school, the principals and a lot of those schools, they know the obligation to report to us. We've had cases where, the public will go to their principal, the principal will report it to us. And our uptick, we have had an uptick from assistant principals and principals, particularly over the last 2 years, of reporting to us different things that have come in. We also have our public website where we post our work. And just as a side note, separately, I think the press tends to cover a lot of the sexual cases for us. So I think that the public does see those and knows to report those to us too.
If a case, for example, it gets a lot of publicity and the case turns out to be false, how do we remedy the person they filed the case against?
You mean there's something that hits the paper and
Right.
ends up...
And it turns out to be false.
Okay, so that might be the allegation comes in and we haven't finished the investigation. So that would be go ahead to the law department. That's not, if an allegation, there are a lot of allegations.
Right. I know there's a lot.
And I think actually, we're the fact finders, right? So whether something is considered not substantiated is very important. It's just as important as substantiated because
Correct.
the person has that hanging over their head. So we don't, our job is to find the facts. If someone was wrong because it was publicized in some way, then they can take that up with litigation.
I'm going to ask this weird question. Does SCI conduct anti-corruption training for New York City Public School staff? And if so, how often? When was the last one?
So it's not frequent. We do, this is something that we've actually been trying to figure out if we're going to create like a training unit to do it. We've talked with the general counsel's office as far as their compliance role and their role in training the staff. I know that there's different attorneys in each of the districts who also remind all the principals every year in the very beginning as to, this is the reporting obligations, things of that nature. We do have people go to different units to do special training when we think there's training needed. Some of the attorneys will go over, but we don't have a rotation basis of trainings in that respect.
Give us a few examples of what's considered corruption for New York City Public Schools staff.
Oh,
Just give us a couple,
okay.
for those who don't know.
It could be everything from, somebody who's providing services for special needs children who doesn't provide the services and then bills for those services. So that's just a frequent, not frequent, but that comes up often.
Theft of time.
Theft of time, it comes up. But also there's the more complicated ones. Like we had a case recently that was with the Department of Justice antitrust unit where it was a bidding issue where vendors were, a vendor was collecting bids and then submitting things. So there's all forms of corruption. It could be everything and anything. It's hard to
That's why it's important for the training, because folks may be doing things and not realizing that they're also getting in trouble, or they should not be doing it because there was no training or form of it. I think that should happen. And it shouldn't take a long time, or when a scandal happens, for them to have that training. It should be ongoing for them to know. Thank you, Chair Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Former Educator, for 22 years. Did I get the number right? I had it wrong before.
Yeah, it's 22 years. That's why I was asking those questions, because when I was teaching, those were not taught. The only thing we got was a letter every Christmas telling us that we can only allow a gift $25 or less, nothing more than $25. So that's why I was asking for that question, what defines corruption for, New York City public staff?
Gotcha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to continue a little bit on OSI. I think there was a 2015 SCI investigation that said there's insufficient supervision of OSI investigators and OSI investigations, and that DOE should take steps to ensure that there is more supervision, that it becomes more part of the unit. Now, I know you can't necessarily comment specifically, but I just didn't know, do you feel that it has changed since then? Is the working relationship not only good, but also beneficial to the students and to the system as a whole, to the people?
Okay, so I wasn't working in this role back in 2015, but I do know that our relationship with them is a good relationship, and that I think that they too, and you can talk with them, that I think that they too also have talked about their struggle for investigators, but that doesn't stop us from giving them the cases.
Well, you should. If they're supposed to go to them, they're supposed to go to them.
Yes,
Okay.
so.
I mean, again, since I'm such a tech nut, do you feel that they have some of the forensic needs addressed and case management needs that obviously I'd like you to have, or is it everybody's struggling on the same, what I would call software, hardware,
I don't
tech
know,
needs?
Yeah, I don't know what their struggle is,
Okay,
so I don't want to speak to that.
okay. One more last question. So, I think your investigations and others that will result in criminal prosecution or recommendations, what is the most recent data on how many investigations have resulted in prosecution and how many have resulted in recommendations?
So, in 2023, we had 15 cases that were referred to prosecutors that resulted in 1 arrest. In 2024 so far, we have 2 arrests. I don't have the specific numbers of referrals this year.
Okay.
But
And then again, how many have been terminated from employment? Is that something that I know that ends up going to DOE, and then I guess you get information along those lines. What's the most recent on recommendations that have led to termination of employment.
So we make recommendations for the terminations.
Right,
and,
doesn't mean it happens,
it
but you
doesn't
do
mean
make
it
the
happens.
recommendations.
Let me just get the number for you because I have it. Let's see, I wrote it down. You have the number? Oh, no, it's the last numbers.
We've been joined by Councilmember Diana Ayala. She has another title, but I just go with council member.
So for the recommendations, there've been 287 personnel recommendations. Let me just get the
That was in 2-3 or
2023.
in 23? Yeah.
And let me just figure out, because I don't have the number right in front of me. 101 problem codes, yeah, so it was,
You said 287.
I think it's 287, we gave recommendations for them to do some sort of discipline. 101 problem codes, 56, we said strong disciplinary up to termination. So there's different recommendations that we have provided, and then 90 that were specifically just appropriate disciplinary
Okay.
actions.
And then what's the date on how many investigations have resulted in an employee being placed in a, I'm calling it the right name, reassignment center? I call it something else, but I won't mention it.
So the reassignment centers, that is something that the DOE decides who's going to go to the reassignment centers. We don't make those decisions.
Okay.
However, we do have a communication with their Office of Personnel Investigations, the OPI, where they might say, by the way, we've reassigned this person. Or occasionally we might say, we have a case and we just want you to be aware of these facts, because if it never came through you, that these are some of the facts, and it's their determination whether someone should go to the reassignment center.
Okay. How many people, you may not know this, on the other end at DOE are deciding what is the outcome for this individual? I mean, some of them go to trial, some of them go, how does that work? Or is, that's not your purview specifically, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, it's not our purview, and we let
them do it.
DOE do the DOE.
Okay. We will be asking them at another time. The most recent reports, investigations, as we understand it, resulted in 1 arrest in 2-3. I think you mentioned 2 arrests in 2-4.
Right.
4 in 22 and 2 in 21. I guess you mentioned slightly different numbers. But why do so few investigations result in arrest and criminal prosecution? Now, again, is this based on your recommendations or DOE's, et cetera? But
So
it sounds like it's such a huge system. I'm not saying that, we're looking for bad actors, but it just seems like very few considering this huge number of people involved.
right, and it just, if you think about it, many are teachers, right? So that they're not sitting there handling money, they're not like doing
But the
things.
vendors,
But the vendors,
I
do.
think,
I agree.
I'm more interested, to be honest with you, I've spent, Councilmember and I, we spent a great deal of time on the vending issues of a different agency called Department of Social Services and the migrants. It is making me crazy. So I understand, so we're not necessarily in the same situation, but these vendors take advantage of our city, I feel.
Yes, so that is one aspect, that if our investigators are not so overworked with what they're currently doing, and one of the things that I would like to obtain from the DOE is that direct information from contract and purchasing. I think it would make it easier for us to do more of the vendor type of procurement cases. But we do have some cases underway that are with different prosecutors right now that involve, a vendor and different things. So we're trying to work on that. And it's also the prosecutor's decision. There are many times that we've gone to prosecutors' offices and we think this is a great case, and it's not a sexual in nature.
No, I understand that.
And they're the ones that make the decision. I'm not the prosecutor. I wish I could be and be able to prosecute the cases, but that's not the situation.
So is most of the conduct investigated by SCI not criminal, or is there a percentage?
Well, many of it is criminal.
Right.
Right, but it's...
But if you did more on the vendor side, it may or may not be.
No, I think that, it may or may not be. That's,
The reason I ask is, my experience is, when I was borough president, I had all of Manhattan. I went to all of the hundreds of DOE/school meetings, and these book vendors are something else. I mean, that's just one example. I mean, they're just taking us for rides. And again, I don't know if it's criminal, but it's certainly waste and fraud,
Yes.
at least in my opinion. So those are the would that be the kind of thing that SCI would look at? I'm not saying it's criminal, but I'm saying you're overcharging
Yeah.
for something that's a product that's not worth purchasing, at least from what I could see.
Right, so from what I recall, there was a case in the past where it was a book situation, and was it taxes that they were not paying, or was it, I forget what it was, it was.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was textbooks that were not, tax discount, right, so we did actually have a tax case, not a tax, but it was a discount for the DOE for, where a vendor for books was not applying that discount, that the contract actually, required the discount, but they didn't, apply that discount. So we are very aware that this is an angle that we would like to pursue.
I feel so strongly about it.
Yes. I mean, in 2020, when we asked for, and, we wanted more lines, we really wanted to beef up and have 25 more people, and that was, the plan is to have a much more robust procurement reviews going on. So that, if we can get this balance of getting more investigators in and more analysts, I think that, we can handle the flow of,
I'm sure you recover
Intake.
money.
yes, yes.
So what proportion, maybe you mentioned this, investigated by SCI are sexual inappropriate conduct cases? And I also want to follow up on that because I know in the Post recently, and you mentioned this somewhat, there was an article to the effect that, you are concerned about teachers texting students at inappropriate times and on inappropriate devices. So I don't know if that means that you're going to necessarily lead to a sexually inappropriate situation, but it could. So I just want to know what percentage of cases are, and if you've had any, I don't know, movement on your, your request to stop the sex abuse with
So-
social media.
So in general, there's roughly about 37% of our cases fall into that sexual bucket. Many, if not all, but many of them involve social media, texting, being on different sites. And that's something that we've recommended that the DOE not have just a guideline as to, what a teacher.
You recommend that they have a guideline?
They have a guideline.
They have a guideline.
But we'd rather it be something that would be in a policy, a chancellor's reg,
Got it,
where
okay.
someone could be disciplined just for being, texting a student, because from their personal device, where it's not from a DOE device, because there's no reason for,
None.
a 45-year-old texting someone at 11 o'clock, and at night or on the weekends, and there's some way to curb that. That would be something we'd look for.
Nope. Would matters investigated by your investigators on this issue of sexually inappropriate conduct be referred to the NYPD Special Victims Unit, or maybe they refer more to you, probably? How does that work in terms, I know you mentioned earlier you do work with NYPD in this unit, so I just want to know how often does that happen, or when does it happen, and who makes that determination that it either goes from them to you or you to them?
So we'll get notified from the school, and there'll be an ORS report, and we'll find out about what's going on. And sometimes, the school will call 911, and, the police will show up, and they'll either, they're not going to take a report because the student's not there, or they take a report, but they're not following up further because they say, well, it's not a crime to be texting 500 times, in one day to a student. That's not a crime, So there is this, this balance that we have with special victims. We've taken cases and developed them and then arrested the person where, it's not often, but special victims might say, we don't have this, and they'll refer it back to us. But I recall one, since I've been here, where they referred it back to us, and we reviewed it and talked with the witness, more, and got more information, and then, the person opened up to our investigator, because our Teams 1 investigators really do conduct trauma-informed interviews and can speak and get information from children. So there is a back and forth all the time. Special Victims does a great job, and we work with them. You know, we'll get the results of their, you know, they'll say, hey, this didn't proceed, and things like that. So there is a good relationship with Special Victims.
There's a huge increase, as you said in the testimony and in our report, 60% increase in complaints from 20 to 2023. And so you talked a little bit about how to address this increase, but could you talk a little about, A, why do you think it's happening? That's number one. Maybe because it's easier, as you said, to report on the portal. That's one good reason. I think there's more complaining in general, and I think it's good if people have a concern. They should say something, not be quiet about it. And then, how do you, I think you talked a little bit about this, but how do you weed out complaints that are retaliatory in nature? That's always a concern. Councilmember Joseph was hinting at that also.
Yeah, I think, well, I'll first just talk
Awesome.
about the retaliatory complaints, because I think that does sometimes happen, right? And I think there is also the higher level of anonymous complaints that might be retaliatory, because someone's not happy with.
I get them all the time, and, you know,
Right.
you're destroying the city, Gail Brewer, but they don't sign it. You get them also, right?
So I think there is that certain number, but we can't just assume something's retaliatory, right? You know, each one is going to be investigated based on the information that we have, and we are going to go and investigate it if it rises to that certain level. So, you know, that is one aspect that sometimes you go and you'll talk to, like our investigators will go and talk to the principal and say, oh yes, this is what this person's upset about, and explain what it is, and then you have more context as to why this complaint came in, for the timing of it, or whatever the case may be. But as far as the number of complaints, I think it's because of, honestly, we get a lot that come in from the portal, and I think it is because where we placed our, you know, how to complain. If you don't know about us, you're going to find us from the DOE, whether it's from, and we have more principals and assistant principals referring to us and aware and know what the obligations are, combined with the portal, because our numbers for the portal have just, you know, increased. You know, we're up. When we initially started, we had 855 complaints, and then in 2023, that came in directly from the online portal was 4,724.
Okay.
So there is an uptick in that.
If you had training, there'd be even more, would be my guess.
I know.
And training on vendors, how to report vendors. I mean, it's good to have the training on, and hopefully people know if there's some of these allegations that are personal and horrific.
Right.
But I bet they don't realize how many times they should be complaining about vendors. That's my issue.
I agree with you.
The issue of complaints resulting in investigations since 2015 has fallen from a high of 16%. This was of concern to me, to a low of 4% in 23. So how do you explain the decline in the percentage of complaints which lead to investigations?
So the 2015, because I said, well, what happened in 2015, right? Even though I wasn't here, like, what happened?
Right.
It was the pre-K
Right.
was, you know, instituted, and there was a lot of complaints that came in that year
On the pre-K,
on
okay,
the pre-K.
all right. So then, so the 4% is a more normal number than the 16% is what you're saying?
Yes.
So it was a pre-K. So pre-K was complaining they didn't, what were they complaining about?
I don't know all the specifics.
you weren't there.
I wasn't
Okay.
there, but I think there was a fair
I
number.
didn't know that there were so many complaints. Now there's complaints that we don't have enough seats, but that's and enough money to go with it. But that's a different story. It is not an investigation. It's a policy issue of our mayor. What is the average time, again, case by case, taken to complete an investigation, and how has this changed over the past 5 years, if it has or has not?
So we don't, put a number and a time frame for each investigation. It doesn't mean that we don't move our cases along. We have case reviews on a regular basis, and it really, will depend on the facts of the case and whether we're getting the information we want back from subpoenas, whether it's document intensive or not, whether, the investigator needs to interview a sampling of students to get their feedback. So it really depends on the case. And I don't want to put timeframes on these because we also do have, teachers have a right not to speak with us too. And that's also something that comes into the time frame too. So, our caseloads have risen for because we have less investigators, which I think is going to end up, taking a longer time. But right now, everyone's working as hard as they can with the amount of cases that they have.
Okay. Again, along with the vendor, something that is of concerning to me, I think we've talked about it, but proactive investigations, not necessarily as important as some of the criminal activity that goes on, but to me, again, staffing is always the issue, but can you give some examples of, even though you have less staff to be able to do this, some proactive investigations versus investigations that responded to allegations? I mean, this would be,
Sure.
This is again, training, this is again, rooting out systemic issues, but go ahead.
Yeah, so right now we do have some proactive investigations going on, like specifically ones that, I don't want to talk about just yet, and another one that's more of about the processes, and that's going on too. As far as, sometimes our proactive investigations may work out and may not.
No, that's why you
so-
do them.
Yeah, so there was one where it was, there was a concern, there was something in the paper about, two school-age students and, something horrible happening to them. And I'm thinking, well, how come the school wasn't aware that they were malnourished and, what happened here? Shouldn't the school have had a role? And then I realized that those two students were homeschooled. So then I was like, well, is there any way that somebody from the DOE should have had contact after reviewing that process, but then also finding out that ACS had been involved, made us feel better about it. But so there's the proactive reviews that we currently have underway. Some reviews don't pan out. We did proactive review of when we had a case that we might expand it, right, for like a hot bus case where we say, wow, we're getting complaints about students who are, it's 100 degrees on a bus and they're special ed kids. Let's go find out what can we do and what is the process for something like that. So we'll look at that further. As far as contraband there was, just one person saying, I think there's an issue with contraband. We said, well, why don't we take a sampling? So we said, all right, we're just going to mobilize the entire office and do a sampling. Go and find out what's in the safe in every school, things like that. So we do take those when we have enough people, and we'll do those. And we are currently underway with. Right now, we have some that are going on too.
Okay. I mean, homeschooling obviously increased during the pandemic.
Right.
And again, that would be something that it may not pan out, but that would be something that I would think, and again, oversight of the city council could also help. Sometimes we have oversight hearings that you could listen and say, okay, this needs further investigation. So again, we also have a wonderful staff here. One of the issues that we've been looking at is just getting the special education children in the bus to school on time. That seems to be 100 years of not happening. So that's an example, and the list goes on and on, unfortunately, but contraband would be one of them. In what instances are investigation reports published or not published online, and is that a policy decision or a regulation? You talked a little bit about what you do have to put online, but go ahead.
So it's really a decision as to, what to post and what not to post publicly. Sometimes you'd say, well, maybe this is a good idea to post this so that people can be reminded of the Conflicts of Interest Board. You're going to get a fine if you do this, even though it's something that you might say seems smaller, but it's still important to post that so people know. And then there might be something a little bit more complicated that we say, you know what, let's put this as a public report. I think that it would be watered down if we just kept every single letter and posting every single thing. So we try to be selective to give like a more, an easier way for someone to just look and say, oh, this is the types of things.
And sometimes it's, like I said, personnel, sometimes it's vendors, both of them could be posted online.
Yeah.
Okay. What percentage of complaints are anonymous? And of course, I assume that it's harder to get a substantiation rate from those cases, but I wanted to know. And if you don't have that data, I would be interested to know, even anecdotally, whether that's an issue or not.
So we do have that. So for 2022, we had 802 that were anonymous.
That's a lot, wow.
I know. And then for 2023, we had 636 that were anonymous. And anecdotally, we have one of our, a case that's with one of our prosecuting partners that came in anonymously. So, you know, some of them are fruitful, and they're taken just as serious as other cases. And some people don't want to put their name to it and then change, and as they get comfortable, you know, it was somebody in our intake unit that made this person comfortable enough to say who they were, so we got more information. So those cases are very important to us too.
Okay. Do you have recommendations regarding the effectiveness of the tracking and reporting required by Local Law 43 of 2020?
I would love for the DOE to take all of our recommendations and approve them and accept them. That's, you know.
You mentioned some that get, and some that don't earlier, so, okay.
Some do and some don't, and it is a back and forth. And some, you know, we are not the policymakers for the DOE, they are. And sometimes they have, you know, reasons that that we may not consider because we're the investigators and we're looking at from the angle and our lens of trying to stop corruption or trying to fix a problem, and they may look at from a different lens. But overall, I think that it's a good relationship with them. There are some that we wish that they would do, but we're not the enforcement of them.
Right.
You know, we can't enforce
Maybe we
our
can follow up
policies,
on some of your
procedure
recommendations. Do you have, maybe this is or is not appropriate, but do you have regular meetings with DOE or standing meetings to discuss the policy and procedure recommendations that you do make?
Sure, there's like a monthly back and forth.
Monthly?
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
but they, you know, they have 30 days to reply. We say on the bottom, please reply in 30 days. They typically do ask for extensions.
Okay.
And, you know, we're okay with that because that means they're considering it and thinking about it, and so there is a back and forth.
I think the website indicates that there are still 16 policies and procedures from 2019 under advisement. Is that accurate? Can you explain why those recommendations are still under advisement? That would be a very long extension.
That is a long extension. You know, effectively, I would consider those probably are rejections at this point,
That's what I was-
unless they've actually revamped and changed whatever processes that was, you know, where we made the recommendation. But
Okay. Do you follow up on these old recommendations? I guess by that point, it's moot, perhaps, but there are still even some from 2020 still pending. So how do you decide whether to bug them or not, or
So-
call us to harass them?
so,
I'm
there-
very good at harassing, and so is Councilmember Ayala.
good to know. So sometimes we'll reissue the same one again. And we've done that, you know, multiple times, particularly for the social media one. Or we've done that also for the provider, the billing for providers. We've issued that more than once. And, you know, there's some conversations with that. I know we've been told that it's an important considerations for especially for the social media one. But that's, we don't agree on that.
Right. Well, that is what I was going to ask, because I think it was around 3 years ago when you recommended banning employees from contacting students via text or social media, and DOE said it already forbade most contact, but there was no blanket ban, and you've repeated this, I don't know, many, many times, and since 2021, you've listed all those recommendations as pending, but they're not pending. So I guess at this point, you know, some other kind of action needs to be taking place. What percentage of, how many times do you see this? Has it come up in, you know, cases in particular? I mean, we hear about it, but have there been specific cases?
I don't have the exact number, but I would say the majority of our sexual contact cases and sexual misconduct cases are related to that. Sometimes we can't prove a case, but we'll then say, okay, we can show that there's been this much contact between a student and, you know, whatever, the staff or the CBO or provider. But I would say
Majority of cases is important.
the majority of the cases.
Wow. If DOE accepts your recommendation, let's say for those that they do, how do you make sure that they get implemented by DOE? Is that something that you track?
Oh, for that particular one? Or
No, in general, in general.
Oh, well, we ask them when it's implemented, but we don't go back constantly to ask, but we have had ones that you see that they'll say updated, that it has been implemented or partially implemented, but it's not something that we go back continuously to do. We have investigations to do.
No, I know you're swamped. I'm just trying to give people the sense of what's possible and also the challenges that exist. You talked about the training, but just generally in terms of how do you undertake to inform the public about your watchdog role? Obviously the portal, the website, training would be better. And again, are there other ways that you would like to, if you had more staff, and sort of doing these anti-corruption trainings is what I think you would like to be doing more of?
Yeah.
It's hard to do it, you know, just by somebody calling as opposed to having a systemic training.
I mean, it would be ideal to have a training unit and to develop our own training just for the DOE. I mean, that would be really our ideal goal. And also to inform the public too. I mean, there's different avenues. And if, I would love for that, you know, if anybody from the council would like to share with any of their constituents, because there is all council members are sitting in every single borough and with so many schools within their actual district. And, you know, I'm sure that you do also get complaints from parents and, you know, directing them to us and to letting us know, you know, showing them where our website or just giving awareness would be great. And also reporting into us would be something that would be.
Yeah, we all have newsletters, so I think we should work together on what you'd like the newsletter verbiage to include, and we'll do it.
Okay.
I have the best newsletter and the biggest newsletter,
Appreciate
but I'm
that.
sure everybody has a newsletter. I'm
That'd be
very
great.
partial to my newsletter. On the state level, we talked a little bit about, you know, what state has to do for that one issue, but are there other laws and policies governing DOE? Because people forget DOE is still a state agency. I can't tell you how many times I try to introduce a city law regarding DOE. Sorry, Gail, you're preempted. You have to go to Albany. That happens so many times. So, but are there ways that you would like the state to be supportive of you conducting your oversight?
So for
We
us.
talked about that one issue, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
you know, as far as specific state laws, I mean, maybe they'll do something with social media, you know, phones in schools. I don't know what they'll do with that. But we make our recommendations also to the state if they want to pull someone's license.
Right.
And, you know, I don't know how often that happens, but we do, you know, there are times when we'll have a finding and then we'll, you know, publicize whatever our report is, or it will come out to light that this person is actually teaching in another state because New York State never pulled their license. But that's just, you know, I'm just thinking about the state in general. But they have their own constraints as to what they can and cannot do for discipline for a license. But as far as the 211 would be the most pressing
That's the
issue
one we
for
talked
us.
about earlier.
Yeah, that really is a pressing issue, particularly for us, so that we can get get the people we need would be ideal.
Okay, those are my questions. There's quite a bit of follow-up, which we appreciate, and the fact that you have not testified here before, so that's good that I think the public, and the New York Times was also very helpful in bringing some of these issues to the public. So thank you very much for your testimony, and we hope to talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the name? I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum must be observed. As such, members of the public will remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant at Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you haven't already, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant at Arms and wait to be recognized. When you are recognized, you will have 3 minutes to speak on today's oversight hearing, the Special Commissioner of Investigation for the New York City School District. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you want to submit, please provide a copy to the Sergeant at Arms. You can also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of the close of hearings, and we obviously indicate that audio and video recordings will not be accepted. For in-person panelists, please come up to the table once your name is called. And now I will call our first panel. Benjamin Tucker, Debbie Meyer, and Sharon Brown. Debbie Meyer, if you want to begin.
All protocol observed, thank you. I'm Debbie Meyer, and you probably know me as a literacy and dyslexia advocate. You might know me as a parent of a child that was not taught to read in public school and who had to sue the New York City DOE, as it was then called, to make sure my kid was taught to read at a specialized dyslexia school. Today I'm worried we don't even have the tools for proper oversight of this. I want to talk about the Carter funding that allowed my son to learn to read. The Supreme Court decision, Florence County versus Shannon Carter, has been the only hope for many families to make sure their kids receive a free and appropriate education. But because of really disparate and poor data entry and record keeping, the money spent to outsource the education has not really informed the New York City public schools in any real way. Several years ago, some reporters used the Freedom of Information Act to look at DOE spending on Carter cases. The Excel document they received was so undecipherable to them, I was asked to look at it to see if I could discern any information from it. I first noticed there was no classification of disability listed for each payment, so we couldn't sort by dyslexia or an IDA category. Then I thought, I'll sort it by dyslexia schools. Well, I had to clean up the data because it was so poorly done. We had Windward School, Windward School, the Windward School, alphabetized under T, Windward School under W, and every single dyslexia school was like this. I had to clean up the data for a couple days just to get any information. Then I noticed what was missing. The list was only the independent Carter cases where parents fronted the money and then got reimbursed for tuition. Some other list must have the schools that the DOE paid directly, like Churchill at that time, Sterling Community School. They weren't on the list. The tutors the New York City DOE paid directly were not on the list either. You could not see how much money outsourcing dyslexia was costing New York City public schools. I did notice, however, in cleaning the data, that the special education yeshivas represented nearly 25% of the Carter cases, even though the Hasidic community population is less than 1% of our population. So that kind of shocked me. Similarly, the New York City Public Schools keeps a database of independent education providers, including special education teacher support services. But you can't use this database in print or online because it doesn't tell what these providers are specialized in. You have no idea if any of the providers know the science of reading and are prepared to teach a dyslexic kid. So parents, they just dial for days, interviewing providers to find one that's trained in Orton Gillingham, trained in Wilson. People take time off work to find someone that can teach their kid to read. So while dyslexia is the most common learning disability, and New York City Public Schools has made great strides in changing literacy instruction so dyslexic kids can be identified and supported, this is not enough. We have to keep the pressure on, and we need the tools to do so. We need the tools for the public, for their advocates, for journalists, elected leaders like yourselves. Can the SCI find this information? Can the IBO? Can City Council? I'm just really worried that we're going to fall down the same rabbit hole in a few years. And if we create tools for the dyslexic kids, that tool can be used for other learning disabilities and other issues too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Needless to say, I should have asked more about Carter cases. I'm quite familiar with them. And I know the City Council is trying to, like everybody else for the last many years, trying to figure out what makes sense. But you make it even worse, because if you don't even have a list, I know every school you mentioned, then it's even more challenging. So thank you for your research. It's embarrassing that you had to do it and hadn't already been done. But thank you very much, and we will follow up on your concern. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair Brewer, committee members, and my fellow New Yorkers. My name is Benjamin Tucker, and I'm here representing YAFED. We're an advocacy organization concerned about the quality of education at Hasidic yeshivas. In New York City, there are tens of thousands of students attending yeshivas that fail to provide an education that is consistent with the New York State law. Every non-public school in New York State is required under Education Law, Section 3204, to provide an education that is substantially equivalent to that which is provided by the local school district. Unfortunately, in the Hasidic community, there are scores of yeshivas that have ignored state law and have created a culture of educational neglect. This situation has been allowed to exist for decades. This is a generational problem in the Hasidic community now. The quality of education at Hasidic yeshivas runs the spectrum of virtually a non-existent secular studies program to secular studies programs that are substantially equivalent. That this has been allowed to exist is a function of collusion between elected officials, education regulators, and yeshiva operators. Thankfully, the State Education Department produced clarifying rules that provide a clear framework for enforcement by the local school district. As a result of this action, and court orders resulting from legal cases brought by YAFED, the New York City Department of Education performed quality reviews of 24 yeshivas that resulted last June in 18 yeshivas being deemed to be failing their students. Slowly, the system has begun to respond to this problem. Slowly, action appears to be in process. However, this process requires oversight. Delays drew out the initial investigation for over 7 years. In 2019, the New York City Department of Investigation declared that then-Mayor Bill de Blasio had horse-traded the issue in order to gain political favor with Hasidic community leaders. Throughout all this time, these yeshivas have been generously funded with public dollars in the form of mandated service aid, transportation aid, textbook money, special education funding, and food programs. Each of these government funding programs requires applicants to attest that they are in compliance with all local and state laws, yet we know that these yeshivas are not. It is an undisputed fact that 18 yeshivas are not compliant. We urge the Special Commissioner to launch a full investigation into funding that has been provided to yeshivas that provide only a religious education. We urge the Special Commissioner to provide ongoing oversight to the Office of Non-Public Schools at the Department of Education. This office is charged with ensuring the compliance of non-public schools. This issue has been far too politicized over the years to allow these processes to continue unwatched. Compliance must be verified. Politics must be removed from the assurance of compliance. Thank you.
Thank you, and your chair of YAFA is the most wonderful woman alive. She's so fabulous. I just want to make sure that I say that.
Thank you. I'll relay it to her, but I think
Please.
she's also watching this right now.
She's so fabulous.
Hello, My name is Sharon Brown. I just want to say hello, everyone. I want to say release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go defend Israel. I would like to know if you guys are going to do something concerning the hostages here. I'll get into my testimony. Are you going to do something to cover that issue?
No, not today, no.
Not today, I know. In the future?
That has nothing to do with this hearing.
Okay, so I just put that out there. Okay, so I want to talk about the sexual abuse procedures. We have to make sure that the teachers are removed immediately when they are charged or someone says that they have done something to them sexually, and the student should be put on training at home. They can learn from home or go to a different school until they fix that situation. There needs to be some kind of procedure there so that the child is not still left in danger. So there has to be something done to do a whole full procedure on that. I want to chime in on the yeshivas. The investigation, whatever they do concerning the yeshivas, they can't force teaching on someone that is religious, Jewish, and Christian. But what they can check is how well the students are doing having a religious education versus those who have a secular education. Is it affecting them poorly, or is it just not coming up to a certain standard that you think they should have? How are they doing in the next grade? How are they doing in their schools and colleges when they go on in school? Are they functioning at the proper levels, or do you just want them to do a specific curriculum? I think the yeshivas are doing very well, that we don't have any problem with people saying that their students are falling behind or something like that. As far as secular studies are concerned, they can learn that in other grades. We need to return prayer, Bibles, the flag, American flag, the Pledge of Allegiance into school. We need more religious studies in the public schools, not just in yeshivas. So we need to incorporate what the yeshivas are doing in our school. You don't see many school shootings in a yeshiva. So what the yeshivas are doing, that kind of teaching prevents the shootings in school. So we want to get those things taken care of, and that kind of religious training. So prayer needs to be put in our school, Bibles, flags, religious training, Judeo-Christian, Jewish, needs to be placed in our school, not taken out of yeshivas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have one person on the Zoom. Thank you very much, the panel here. If you want to stay and listen, you're welcome to, but thank you very much. Christy Angel.
Starting time.
Christy Angel, and I'm the parent of a New York City public school student within District 75, a parent advocate, and I reside in Queens. Thank you, Chair Brewer and members of the committee for convening this meeting. This topic directly has affected me based on parent engagement. Parent engagement is considered to be an issue, but when a parent is active, they are considered and treated like a nuisance. I have an example of this and how this has affected me. During COVID, a unilateral decision was made by the principal to ban our court order provider based on an assumed Zoom bomb. This was after my in-depth advocacy and questions of my son's IEP being out of compliance and fraudulent Sandy. An investigation was supposedly initiated, but no case number was given for over 2 years. I was advised it was bounced from OSI to SBI to SCI, or any other acronym available. This was done without questioning my son's worker, who was stripped of due process and had a damage to his reputation. The effect set my son into a regression that we deal with to this day. He was set back for 5 years. Behaviors we had curbed came back full force. When I attempted to send him back to school, I was advised that they would call 911 because they could not manage him. We were forced to start over at a new school, which I felt like was the game plan the entire time. His worker was banned from the school building, was banned from working with my son online within 2 days of the alleged event, and he was not questioned. Parents have no recourse or protections when they are targeted. They have no real proof of investigations, especially when they are bounced back to the school, even if there's a conflict of interest. The checks and balances are not fair and leave parents subject to the powers that be and cover-ups. I still see this happening to this day with no recourse. Parents have reached out to me for help, and I have nothing to tell them. The system feels rigged. Parents' voices need to be highly considered, and accountable measures put in place for how parents' voices are included that extend beyond the blurb in the IEP. Investigations should not be ethically given to schools with direct conflict of interest. Some preliminary level of groundwork should be done prior to dictating where a case goes for investigation and who does it. Protections need to be in place for parents. I also would ask that the committee check the data to see how many cases are referred back to school-based investigations and the outcomes. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. And offline, if you want to contact me, I'd be glad to follow up. Thank you for testifying today. We had signed up from Eileen Izari Ramirez and Evan Stone. So if you are either online or in person, please let us know. We've had everyone testify who signed up. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify in person, please visit the table and complete a slip. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify virtually, please use the raised hand function in Zoom, and we will call on you in order of hands raised. I will now read, I think we already did this, who registered. Seeing no one else, I would like to note again that written testimony, which will be reviewed in full by committee staff, must be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing, and you can mail it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, everyone. This hearing is ended.